Hello, Robs. We're back with Tried for Her Life by E.D.E.N. Southworth. Chapter 8. Let's make sure that's where it was. Oh, yeah, don't touch my face. Let's get a book under here so I don't have to interrupt my brilliant reading as if I was Kelsey Grammer. Chapter 8. Nellie to the Rescue. She never failed a friend and never feared a foe. Nicole. Help was at hand. There came a sound as the rushing of tiny feet, and suddenly the little Skye Terrier rushed into the cavern and with joyous barks darted upon her mistress's bed. But instantly those barks of joy were changed into a howl of rage and pain as she sprang at the throat of the robber, and closing her teeth upon his windpipe, hung there like grim death. With a yell of agony, the giant threw up his hands and seized the dog to tear her off, but Nellie held fast. He might have torn her in two, but he could not have made her let go her hold upon his throat. He raised his huge fist to brain her. "Don't hurt the dog," cried Sybil, starting up and seizing his arm, her palsy of terror dispelled by her love for her faithful little four-footed friend. "Down, traitor and coward," shouted another voice, and all started and looked around to recognize the robber captain standing before them with a pistol leveled straight at the head of his lieutenant. "Call this brute off, then. She's cutting my throat with her cursed teeth. Call her off, I say, or I'll wring her in two like a worm," gurgled the half-strangled monster as he shook off the clasp of Sybil and seized the little dog. "Drop your hand, you villain, or I'll shoot you where you stand," thundered the captain, cocking his pistol. The bully instantly obeyed. "Come, Nellie, dear Nellie," called Sybil, sinking to a sitting posture on the side of her bed. The obedient little terrier immediately let go her hold and leaped down into her mistress's lap, and with barks of delight began to lick her hands and face. Sybil, utterly overcome by the rapid events and conflicting emotions of the last few minutes, burst into a passion of tears as she clasped the little creature to her bosom. "Madam," said the robber captain, suddenly changing his whole manner as he turned towards the lady, took off his hat, and subdued his voice to its softest and smoothest tones. "Madam, I will relieve you of the presence of this ruffian, and tomorrow I will make such amends to you for this insult as may lie in my power." Sybil did not and could not answer him. She only clasped her little dog closer to her heart and wept. "And now, sir," said the captain sternly, wheeling around upon his huge lieutenant and pointing to the outlet of the grotto, "go before me out of this. This crime must be accounted for at another time and place." The crestfallen monster slouched out of the cavern, followed by his captain, who turned once more at leaving to say, "Rest in peace now, lady. You shall no more be disturbed, and I will send Gentiliska to stay with you." "Oh, thanks, do so, pray do so," said Sybil eagerly. When she was left alone with her little dog, she fell to caressing and fondling her, as with all her heart and soul. "Oh, Nellie, darling Nellie, what a little heroine you are! But how did you come here, Nellie?" she inquired, holding the little creature's curly head between her hands and gazing down into its soft brown eyes. "How did you find me, Nellie?" Nellie lapped her lady's cheek, and then jumped down and ran to the outlet of the cavern, and then ran back and jumped again into her lady's lap. "Oh, yes, Nellie, dear, I understand. You came that way and found me here, but that tells me nothing. How did you know I was here, little doggy?" Poor little Skye Terrier. She knew that a question was asked her, and she tried her best in her eloquent, dumb way to answer. And while she was jumping off and on her mistress's lap, and whining and caressing, the cavern door was darkened once more, and Gentiliska entered. "Oh, I am so glad you have come. Be quiet, Nellie, darling. That's a girl, you know," exclaimed Sybil, speaking first to her visitor and then to her little dog, who seemed inclined to make some hostile demonstrations against the supposed enemy. "Why, what dog is that?" inquired Gentiliska, her mouth and eyes wide open with amazement. "She is my dog, my dear, darling, devoted, brave little Nellie," replied Sybil, piling on the complimentary adjectives, and I leave it to any reader of mine if Nelly did not deserve them all. But how on the face of earth did she come here? Gasped gentle Liska. She didn't come on the face of the earth, but through the bowels of the earth, so she says, and I never knew her to tell a falsehood. But how came she to trace you here? Ah, that's just what I have been inquiring of her, and she has been trying to explain to me. You know these four-footed friends of ours have a good deal of difficulty in communicating with us, though through our stupidity, bless you, not theirs. They can understand us a great deal better than we can understand them. Nellie knows very well what I ask her, and she answers my question, but I don't in the least understand what she says. But when did she come? You know that. She came in the nick of time to fly up Moloch's throat and hold him till Satan came to deliver me. Here the girl burst into a peal of laughter that almost offended Sybil, who gravely inquired, "What is the matter? I am laughing at your hallucination that Satan came to deliver you." "What do you mean?" inquired Sybil, surprised and displeased at the girl's untimely mirth. "Why, you goose," laughed Gentiliska, "don't you know? Can't you see that Satan is 100 times worse and 1,000 times more dangerous than Moloch? I tell you that Captain Incanu came to your cave on the same errand that brought his lieutenant here. Only as he happened to be the last comer, and as he found the other here, he chose to take credit as your deliverer. Bosh! Your little dog saved you. No other under heaven did." "How do you know these facts?" "By watching. You know when I left you?" "Yes, go on." "As I was returning to my own den, I saw a shadow pass before me, and then I knew that we had been tracked to this place. But whether by Satan or Moloch or any other one of the band, I could not tell. By the time I had crept back to the entrance of the large cavern, the spy must have regained his place, for they were all at the table as I had left them." "Why then did you not return to me, since you knew that my place of concealment was discovered?" inquired Sybil reproachfully. "Because I could do you better service by staying outside and watching, which I did. About an hour ago, as I sat watching and listening in my own den, I heard a stealthy step, and peeping out, I saw the huge form of Moloch stealing towards your retreat. I stepped out silently and stole softly after him, with the full intention of running back, giving the alarm, and raising the whole band, in case my suspicions should be true, that he intended to harm you. Of course, I could not have helped you at all if I had been in here with you. He wouldn't have let me pass out to have roused the men. He would have brained me on the spot, and had you at his mercy. Do you see?" Yes, I see. "Oh, heaven, deliver me from this dreadful place," sighed Sybil. "All in good time. I followed Moloch until I saw him take the little turn that led to your den. Then I turned and fled, or was about to fly to rouse the men to your rescue, when I saw the graceful figure of Satan gliding towards me. As in that half darkness I had recognized Moloch only by his huge form, so now I knew Satan only by his graceful gliding motions. I drew back into a crevice of the rock and waited until he had passed me and taken the same turn towards your den. And then I knew that you were quite safe. Either of these men alone would have been fatal to you, but together they were perfectly harmless. But just then, before I heard a dog bark, where never a dog had barked before, I stole after Satan towards the entrance of this place and hid myself to listen to the fun. I heard the row. Oh, wasn't Captain Incanu's righteous indignation fine? At length I heard Satan order Moloch to leave the place. And then I heard him tell you that he would send me to stay with you. Then I thought it was about time for me to leave, and I stole away and fled as fast as I could towards my own den. And when I got there, I covered myself up in my bed and feigned sleep when the gallant captain came to call me. So here I am. Oh, that heaven would deliver me from the dreadful place," repeated Sybil. "All in good time, as I said before, and now I think you had better try to sleep. The little dog will watch us and give the alarm, in case any other marauder should venture to intrude on us," counseled the girl. "Sleep! I have scarcely slept a whole night since I was forced to leave my home. Sleep! The best sleep I have I have had has been more like swooning than has befallen me in the daytime. I cannot sleep. Well, then please be quiet while I sleep. I'm fagged out with all this, said Gentiliska, throwing herself down on the mossy floor of the cave and settling herself comfortably to rest. Meanwhile, Sybil sat with her tired little dog lying on her lap. She was too wretched to think of resting, too anxious to think of anything but escape. Nothing that could happen to her in the outer worlds seemed so appalling as the dangers that surrounded her here. And while her companion slept soundly, Sybil racked her brain for means of escape. People before now, chained in dungeons and weakened by imprisonment, have nevertheless contrived to burst their fetters and break through bolts and bars and press through guards and effect their freedom. And here was she, a captive certainly, but neither fettered nor locked up nor guarded except by one sleeping girl. Why could she not make good her escape? What should hinder her? If only she knew how to find her way out of this labyrinth. In her restlessness and distress, she groaned and lifted her hands to her head. Her little dog immediately woke up, and in quick sympathy climbed up to her bosom, and whining licked her face. A sudden inspiration filled the soul of Sybil and directed her course. If this poor little four-footed friend of mine, with nothing but her instinct and her affection to guide and sustain her, if she contrived to find me, hid away as I was from all human help, surely I, with my higher intelligence and greater powers, should be able to find my way out of this labyrinth with her help. Saying this to herself, Sybil tenderly caressed her little dog, then lifted it to her bosom, wrapped Beatrix Pendleton's camel's hair shawl closely around her, and went to the entrance of the cavern through which Nelly had entered. Here she paused for a moment to listen. All was silent except for the deep breathing of Gentiliska. That only proved how profound the sleep of the girl was. The sleep of the girl. Then she caressed her little dog again, saying in a low voice, "Lion, Nelly, where is Lion?" The little Skye Terrier pricked up her ears and whispered. Then Sybil was sure that Nelly understood her words. "Let us go and find Lion, Nelly. Lion, Lion, Lion," said Sybil, setting the little dog down and harking her on by the way she had come. Nelly remembered where she had left Lion, and as with a glad bark she leapt forward and ran on as fast as the tortuous nature of the dark subterranean passage would permit her to do, pausing now and then to rest herself and to allow her mistress time to overtake her. "Poor dear little faithful Nelly, don't run so fast. You were tired almost to death when you came in from your first journey, and now you set out immediately on this moment. I ask you to do it, but abate your zeal, dear little friend, or you will not be able to hold out to the end," said Sybil, sitting down and caressing her little dog, while they both rested. When they recommenced their journey, they found the passage growing narrower, darker, and more tortuous than before. They were compelled to move slowly and cautiously. Sybil had already recognized the natural underground road by which she had been brought to the robber's cave, but she did not know this portion of it. So she supposed that she must have been brought through it while in that state of unconsciousness, into which she had fallen from terror on first being seized by the masked and shrouded forms of the men who carried her off. She therefore hoped that she was near the outlet of the subterranean passage, but where that outlet might be she could not guess. The last she remembered before falling into the swoon of horror was the vault of the haunted chapel. The first she saw on recovering herself was the middle of the subterranean passage. But whether that passage had started from the vault, or whether the men had carried her any distance over the upper earth before descending into it, she had no means of knowing or surmising. She must wait for the revelation at the end of this underground road. The end was fast approaching. Far ahead, a little dim dot of gray light kept dodging right and left before her eyes, following, as it were, the abruptly turning of the passage. It drew nearer, nearer, and now at last it was before her. The little dog that had been trotted beside her mistress now sprang past her and began to dig away at the hole with her paws. Sybil stooped down and peered through it. By the early light of the now dawning day, she discerned a section of a foundation wall. that she felt sure must be a part of the old vault under the haunted chapel. The little dog now jumped through the hole and turned around and pawed and whimpered, as if inviting and expecting Sybil to follow her. She understood the situation well enough now. She knew that this small hole was the entrance from the underground passage into the vault, and that it must have become partly filled up by the falling in of the bricks and mortar at the blowing up of the church. She went to work to try to remove the obstructions. It was a work of more time and toil than of real difficulty. With her delicate hand, she began to take away the broken stones, timbers, and plaster until she pulled out a short, narrow piece of plank, which she immediately began to use as a tool to dig away the refuse. A half an hour's hard work cleared her way into the vault. She passed in and once more saw the dome of heaven above her head. Little Nelly jumped around her with delighted barks and then ran up the broken walls of the vault and turned around and looked at her and barked as if to say, this way, but the irregularities in the dilapidated wall that furnished a sure foothold for Nelly's little feet would not serve her mistress's turn. So Sybil looked about the place and cast around in her mind to consider how she should contrive to reach the upper ground. She soon saw the way, but she had to rest before she could commence a new work. So she sat down and called the dog to her, and both remained quiet for about 10 minutes. And then Sybil arose and went to work and piled up the bricks and stones until she had raised for herself a rude stairway half up to the top. By these, at some little risk of life and limb, she climbed out of the vault and found herself standing on the edge of a heap of rubbish, which was all that remained of the old haunted chapel. Here again she sat down to look around her. The sun was just rising from behind the mountain and tinging all the wintry scene with the golden hues of autumn. Through it was a clear, cold, frosty morning. Sybil was perspiring from her late hard work, so she drew her heavy shawl around her shoulders to protect her from a chill while she rested. The little terrier, who had leaped up from about after her mistress, would not rest, but continued to jump about and bark as if to testify her joy and triumph in a work accomplished. Every leap and bark said as plainly as tongue could have spoken the words, I have found her and brought her back. I knew I could. I knew I could. I've done it at last. I've done it at last. I know you have, Nelly, dear, and I love you better than anybody in the world except Lion. But now I want you to help me to find Lion, Nelly. Lion, Lion, said Sybil, holding the little terrier's face between her hands and gazing into its loving brown eyes. Nelly jumped away at her bidding and ran all over the place, snuffing jealously for some moments, and then, finding herself clearly at fault, ran back and whimpered her disappointment on her mistress's lap. You have lost trace and scent of Lion? Oh, Nelly. Oh, Nelly, Nelly, what shall we do? Venture back boldly to Blackhall? Run right in the teeth of the law officers and be snapped up by them? Sighed Sybil. Nelly understood. A horror in the words, if not the words, and howled dismally. Just at that moment, a halting step was heard approaching, and a sad voice sighing. I sorter can't give her up. No, I can't. If she did bite me, if it wasn't out in malice to me, but out in devotion to the mistress, only to make me drap her down so she could go back to this vault and wait for her mistress, which I do expect she have starved to death by this time, but I'll see. Nelly, Nelly. Sybil's heart leaped with joy at recognizing the voice of her faithful servant Joe, and Nelly jumped forward with a cry of delight to meet him. So you in here yet in this supernumerary spear? Thank my master in heaven for that, exclaimed Joe, stooping painfully while he leaned upon his crutch to lift the little dog to his bosom. But who that young woman? Nelly, continued Joe, whose eyesight was none of the best, pausing abruptly and staring at Sybil, who was completely disguised by the large Indian shawl and the red merino gown, both of which were entirely opposite to her usual style of dress. Joe hobbled towards the supposed stranger cautiously. Don't you know me, dear old Joe? Inquired Sybil, dropping the shawl from her head and rising to her feet. Ah! Yelled Joe in a prolonged howl of horror, at which he took to be a ghost. And then, as he could not run away, he dropped dog and crutch, fell flat upon his face, and roared for mercy. Sybil and her little dog both tried to soothe and reassure him. Sybil by repeating to him over and over again that she was alive and well, and that there was nothing whatever to fear at that moment, and little Nelly by running around him and trying to poke her nose under his face to find a place to kiss or to lick. But Joe, for a time, was perfectly inaccessible to reason, and Sybil, in discouragement, left him to recover himself alone, while she went and sat down at some distance to wait the issue of the event. After a little while, Joe slowly lifted up his head and cautiously glanced around, whispering, "Is she gone?" "No," answered Sybil sharply. "I'm not gone. I'm sitting here waiting for you to come to your senses." Joe, who after the first glimpse had not dared to look upon the ghost, now ventured from this safe distance to steal a glance. The glance grew into a gaze, and then he spoke. "Miss Sybil? Well, Joe? Is it you?" "Yes, it is I." But is you alive?" "Yes, I'm alive." "Is you sure?" "I am hungry and mad. That should make me sure." "Mad long o' me, Miss Sybil?" "Yes, mad with you for being such a fool. But I thought you was a ghostess." "Bosh, you haven't as much sense as little Nelly," exclaimed Sybil, affecting more anger than she really felt. "But ain't you dead?" mysteriously inquired Joe, gazing at the pale face of his mistress, now very pale indeed, through all that she had suffered. "Ain't you really dead, Miss Sybil?" "Not much, Joe. But wa'n't you robbed and murdered by them ripperate willains?" "Neither the one nor the other, Joe. I am safe and sound, and have my money and jewels still about me." "But wa'n't you reducted?" "I was abducted, Joe, but not harmed. It is a long story, Joe. I cannot tell it now, because I want to know about my husband. Is he safe?" "Yes, Miss Sybil, he's all right now. Only grieving arter you, 'cause everybody believes as you perished in the blowing up of the old chapel. Lord, where was you all the time? Did Nelly find you?" "Yes, Nelly found me, but, Lord, the sense of that little thing. But tell me about my husband. Where is he?" "He is at capping pendulums, doing very well now." "Doing very well now? That means he has been doing badly lately. Has he been ill?" exclaimed Sybil in breathless anxiety. "No, Miss Sybil, but he was in the old chapel when the devil blowed it up." "Oh, good heavens!" cried Sybil, clasping her hands and unable to speak another word. "Don't be scared. He wasn't hurt not to speak of, only stunned and bruised a bit, and he's all right now, only grieving of hisself to death, which is perfectly natural, you see. Goodness knows as I myself hasn't eat a meals with wittles, nor likewise sleeped a wink o' sleep since gone you's been, and oh, how I thank my heavenly Marster as how stored you to us. Come more alive and well," cried Joe, hobbling toward Sybil, sinking at her feet and giving way to his feelings in a burst of sobs and tears. Sybil raised him up, and then noticed for the first time how lame he was. "It's nothing to speak on, Miss Sybil. Only a sprained ankle. I can get on well enough with a crutch, and here I am, willing as able to sarve you as ever," said the poor fellow earnestly. "Thanks, dear Joe. I want you, if you can, to go with me to my husband immediately." "But, Miss Sybil, honey, you look so pale and weak and wore out. Better stay here while I go and get a conveyance." "No, no, Joe. It would take you too long, and I cannot wait. I can walk," said Sybil, impatiently rising and drawing the shawl up over her head, for she had no hat or bonnet. "Name of the Lord, then come on, honey," replied Joe, who knew it would be useless to oppose his mistress when she was fully bent on any purpose. They set out together, picking their way slowly over the heap of rubbish that filled the churchyard and lay between them, and the narrow path leading through the thicket to the river road. Little Nelly followed faithfully at their heels. And that there ends this chapter, bruvs. Goodbye. Goodbye. Goodbye.